Hello, I'm Tom Bailey, and in today's Speaker Stories episode, I'll be getting to know Jenny Garrett, who is an award-winning career coach, a leadership trainer, speaker, and author, with her latest practical and empowering book being Equality versus Equity, tackling issues of race in the workplace. So, Jenny, hello, and a very warm welcome to today's episode.
Thank you. Really delighted to be here, Tom.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I know you're internationally recognized, but whereabouts in the world are you right now?
I'm based in Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire, and it's a little bit cold today.
Yes, it is. I can definitely reflect on that. Thank you so much. And I also know that you are well known for your work in empowering working women
Yeah.
and were awarded an OBE for services to entrepreneurship and women in business.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
amazing. That's huge recognition. And I guess my question is very much linked to this podcast as well. What role has public speaking or speaking in front of audiences really helped you in getting to this position and getting your message out there in the world?
Yeah, it's helped a great deal, actually. I think getting in front of lots of people, one of the things I always remember someone saying to me is when you speak, you might not know who's in the audience, but everyone in the audience knows you. And that's really powerful. So it's meant that when I get in front of an audience, then lots of people know me who I didn't know previously.
Hmm.
I may not remember every face and every name, but they remember me and they tell their friends about me. And what's great about that is that when you have a strong message, a message that you really care about, it travels so much further because of your speaking. So it's played a really big role in and me connecting with what's important to me and me putting that out there so other people can share it.
I love that. And a lot of speakers talk to me about the ripple effect. And a lot of times you just won't know how far that ripple can spread. But I guess it's inspiring knowing that it's out there.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And when you get a message back from someone who says, I was in the audience 3 years ago
Mhm.
and now I'm ready to have a conversation with you think, oh, I was touching people. That's brilliant.
And I guess that outweighs any insecurities or any fears or any shyness that you feel when you stood in front of that audience, when you're knowing that you can have that much impact.
Yes, I guess so. I used to be a really nervous public speaker.
Hmm.
So when I wrote my first book, I went on a bit of a training program and tried to get some help with my nerves and my confidence around speaking. And I think one of the most powerful things for me was really concentrating on who could benefit from my message. Was
Yeah.
there one person in the audience who would find it useful, who it could help, who it could support? And then I stopped thinking about myself and whether I was being articulate or
Mhm.
my knees were knocking or my mouth
Yeah.
was dry, and on that person and hoped my message would reach them. And that really did change. It was a game changer for me to start
Yeah.
thinking in that way.
Really powerful perspective. I guess it's turning the spotlight off you onto the audience and really focusing on what value you can add to them in their lives.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned that you were a really nervous speaker, because I want to kind of go back there. I guess what was the earliest memory of you having to stand up and speak in front of an audience, and how did it go?
Yeah, I don't know about my earliest memory. To be honest, I wasn't a nervous as a child, I don't
Hmm.
think.
Hmm.
Especially not in my home environment. I remember sort of being behind the sofa and pretending to be a preacher and
Yeah.
doing all of that and sort of play acting. I also remember, I think my Holy Communion or my confirmation, I'm Catholic, maybe reading a reading in church and
Yeah.
doing it fine, not beautifully, not wonderfully, but doing it just fine. So there was a point, I think, that I moved from not being self-conscious to being really conscious. And I think it's in the work environment where someone says, these people are watching, this is a really important presentation,
Mm.
you've got to do well. And people start piling on the pressure. That's when I started feeling really nervous, or a presentation as part of an interview
Yeah.
process. I really want this job. So I think it's the pressure I put on myself. Started to think about me so much more rather than just speaking, that turned me into a really nervous public speaker.
Yeah, and we talk about, the fear of others' opinions, the fear of judgment, the fear of embarrassment, making mistakes. There's a little bit of imposter syndrome that creeps in as well. And I guess for some people, that's it then. That's the wall, it's up, and they don't push through that. But you did,
Yes.
which is great. And you mentioned you had some training. What did that look like?
Yeah, interestingly, I had two things. I had just a 1 day speaking training that
Hmm.
was really good. It got you out of your comfort zone, got you doing
Yeah.
things you would never do. I had some coaching, but I think it was a one-off coaching
Hmm.
session, which was NLP related.
Yeah.
And I also joined Toastmasters. And I probably did, I don't know how much you know about Toastmasters,
I know
probably
it really
not.
well.
But I think I did one book,
Yeah.
maybe one book. I know there are many. And that support and that forcing yourself to get up on stage week after week and practice different kinds of speeches was really good in helping me realize that, the worst thing that could happen is I might, fluff my words, but it's really not the end of the world. So that helped give me confidence.
Yeah, you made some really great points there. I think, one thing I'm reflecting on when I started to try and get over my fear of public speaking was I thought I'd buy all the books on presenting, confidence, public speaking, but it just didn't get me anywhere because I knew all the knowledge but didn't apply any of it. So did the same thing as you, joined the Toastmasters, had that safe environment to get out there and start practicing. And I think that's really important for anyone listening is you almost have to go through the uncomfortableness of speaking in front of others to actually get over that fear one day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. But I'd also like to say sometimes I get quite big nerves again. I
Mm,
think nerves are. I choose to call them my friends now.
yeah.
Oh, they're here. They're along for the ride. It means it really matters to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say I never feel nervous. I do, and sometimes more nervous than others.
And I guess, they're the same hormones, the same endorphins, the same reaction that you're having, but you just put in a different perspective on it, which is something that can be learned, which I think's great to hear for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
and I guess at that point then, so you'd had your training and you started to get a little bit more comfortable. What did the next period look like when you decided I can do this and you started to talk in front of others? Was there a particular topic you were talking on, or how did that play out?
Yeah, so it did help that I'd written my first book, and
Hmm.
that was supporting women who were the main earner in their home. So I remember I am one of those people who does put myself out of my comfort
Yeah.
zone. I know, to me, that's the only way to grow. You can't wait to be confident. You can't wait to know it all. You have to put yourself in the situation, and hope that you'll be successful or learn something from it.
Yeah.
So I remember just putting on Twitter, I've written this book. I'd love to speak to audiences about it. And people came to me. I remember traveling sometimes without being paid,
Hmm.
all over Birmingham, different places, and
Hmm.
just being willing to speak to audiences, get better at what I was doing, practice, notice what resonated, what landed with people. So for me, it was getting out there, sharing my message. And as I said, for me, this idea of talking about women being the main earner, I was so passionate about it because it was something people didn't talk about. So I just wanted to talk to as many people, as many audiences as possible who were willing to hear, and see how it landed with them. And so I really practiced then speaking.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. I guess two big highlights for me so far have been one, take the audience off you, put it onto the audience and what value you can add to them. The second one I think is get out there and practice. What other advice would you give somebody listening right now who is maybe an aspiring speaker, would love to do it, but haven't yet quite made that leap?
Yeah, I'm thinking about when I first spoke, I would script it out word for word,
Yeah.
and then I would practice it in front of the
Hmm.
mirror. And I think I probably sounded a bit rehearsed and a bit robotic,
Yeah.
but I delivered it. And then later on, used to do is I'd script it out, but then I'd shorten it to bullet points,
Hmm.
and then use those bullet points to help my memory. Because I think one of the big things for people is memory. So it's either, do I read it and then you lose a bit when you're just reading? Do I have cards? How do I deliver this talk? So yeah, I think memory was one of my biggest challenges. So I would say script it out. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but then bring it back to what are the words that are going to help you remember what you need to say next.
Yeah.
And use your own words and tell
Mm.
your own story. And then it will come naturally. And no one ever knows what you're supposed to say.
Exactly.
So if you miss out a whole paragraph or something else, no one will ever know. And that's a great feeling. You don't say, "Oh, I forgot to say," "Oh, oh no, I've messed it up." No one knows. And the other thing that I always think is that everybody really wants me to do well. No one in the audience is looking at me saying, I hope she messes up
No,
today. I hope she falls off the stage.
no, they're not.
They're really willing me to do a good job, to speak well, to inspire them, to provide some knowledge. Even I always think also about wearing something that I feel I really like, because I always say,
Yeah.
I always say to myself, if they don't like what I'm saying, at least perhaps they'll like what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
All
Of
these are
course.
things that help me with my speaking journey. But script it, but I think that's important. Take people on a journey with you. Take them somewhere, say from A to B to A to Z on a journey. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end
Yeah.
to what you are delivering.
Yeah.
I think that's key, and try and find ways to help you with your memory. Again, and try not to just learn it and then recite it,
Yeah.
because I think that's really difficult.
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
wonder one thing as well. I used to feel not very confident about standing up. I used to hope there'd be a seat for me, but the standing up does help you project your voice, and movement is really good for getting rid of those nerves. So try not to be planted in one place. Even just striding up and down an area will get rid of some of that adrenaline that's pumping through your body.
Yeah, use of space on the stage is really important. And I guess that comes back to body language and being open and using all those great hand gestures as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely used to script everything word for word, learn it word for word. I used to voice record myself and listen to myself over and over again in the car. But ultimately, it sounds robotic. It's not natural. And when you think of a conversation between two people, that's not scripted. You almost have more trust in yourself. So one of my coaches once said to me that questions generate content. So if you can ask yourself questions on stage, like, now what did I mean by that? And then you can
Yeah,
explain what you meant by that. And then what could we do next? And then you almost explain that. It almost helps you to have that structure, but keep prompting yourself to keep talking through it.
I love that. That's really great.
And thank you for all of that. One thing I'd like to talk about now is quite topical, I think, still is the global pandemic, which pretty much wiped out the speaking industry. Did that impact you? And if so, how did you transition to virtual and what was that experience like for you?
Yes, the week that we went into lockdown in the UK, I was supposed to be going to South Africa to deliver some
Oh,
training, and
wow.
then I was supposed to go to France after that, and then Dublin. So I was actually traveling a great deal, and bit by bit, all of these things fell out of my diary.
Yeah.
It was a little bit scary.
Mhm.
However, I had done quite a lot of work online before. So I was working with an organization that had asked me to deliver training online. And so it was quite easy for me to transition into Zoom. But I must say, I tried to be exactly the same on Zoom as I was in an auditorium. And I would stand up and I would dress up and I'd put my
Yeah.
heels on and
Yeah.
and then I realized this is just too much.
Yeah.
People aren't really looking for that from me on a
No.
little screen. And so I just calmed it all down a bit. But I definitely am one of the lucky ones who was still asked to deliver speaking engagements, and I do a lot of training and development. And in fact, what happened was I was able to go to so many more places, to be in India in the morning and then
Yeah.
South Africa in the afternoon, which I would never have been able
No.
to do before. So it was scary, and it did go quiet for a short period of time, but then it just sort of actually mushroomed into something much bigger than it was before. I find it hard now to leave the house to go to a speaking engagement.
Of
So
course.
International Women's Month is a big time for me, and I'm being asked to come and deliver talks, and it's sort of, oh gosh, I
Mm.
I could do 5 talks in a day. I can
Yeah.
even do one if I'm going face to face. But when I am face to face, there's such a buzz from the audience. There's a totally different kind of interaction. There's cues, physical cues that you miss online. So
Yeah.
it's brilliant. But I think now, as a speaker, it really has to be worth your while to leave the house.
Yes.
You can do so much online.
Yeah, absolutely. But it seems here to stay. We've got the blends now. We've got that hybrid option. So, great that people are back in the room. But like you said, you've got the option to speak in 4 different countries in one day if you want to now. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And actually, the very last question from me today, I could have talked to you all day, but the last question is if anybody wants to find out more about you or book you as a speaker, where's the best place for them to go?
Yes, to my website, which is jennygarrett.global. And then you can just contact me via my website. So yeah, that's the great place to find out about everything I do.
Fantastic. What I'll do is I'll post a link to that in the show notes, and I'll also post some links to all of your social platforms as well.
I appreciate that, Tom. Thank you.
So, Jenny, thank you so much for your time today. You've shared so much great value and advice with our audience. Really appreciate you coming along. And yeah, great to meet you.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It was fun.